Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Kelly, CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Good afternoon. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications here at SBAM. And I want to welcome one of our new members. This is Sip Organic Juice Bar and the owner, Christina Ellis. This juice bar is located in Grand Rapids. They partner with multiple local farms and provide consumers with high quality organic and plant-based food. So welcome to Christina and her team. All right, Brian, kind of some big news to start off today's show, and that is that today we filed an amicus brief in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals on the Corporate Transparency Act case that originated in Alabama. So what does this entail? Fill us in.
Yeah, this is kind of a sister case, if you will, to the legal action that we're taking here in Michigan. So we have filed a lawsuit on behalf of our members and also with the Chaldean American Chamber of Commerce, challenging the legality or the constitutionality of the Corporate Transparency Act. There is another case that originated in Alabama, which the plaintiffs, so our side, the same kind of basic arguments that we're making, won at the local court level, at the federal court in the state of Alabama. It has been appealed to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals by the government. So the IRS or FinCEN is appealing it to this level. So there's a case that's kind of like ours in the 11th Circuit. We are in the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals. So eventually our case, whether we win or lose at the local level, will definitely end up at the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals. One thing that people can do around the country is they can weigh in on other cases, and that's what we're doing here. So this sister case in the 11th Circuit, we are making basically the same arguments we're making in Michigan in the form of an amicus brief. And so this is supporting the plaintiffs in that case, laying out a more well-developed argument in a few different areas. So you might recall that in Alabama, that case was one on enumerated powers. And so, in other words, the judge said that the federal government did not have the constitutional authority to pass the Corporate Transparency Act in the first place. Our case, while we also hold that view and make that same argument, we're leaning into more of the Fourth Amendment violation. So this is illegal search and seizure. So we make three big arguments, but the one that we really wanted to lean into and develop very well for consideration was the Fourth Amendment. So the way that we see this is it really gives, first of all, additional support in this other case. It makes sure that all our eggs aren't in the same basket. So different judges in different areas can decide in different ways. We'd love for both of these cases to be successful, or if either of them are, if you get two different decisions out of the 11th Circuit and the 6th Circuit, it increases the likelihood that eventually the Supreme Court will take the case, which is what we want to happen, the United States Supreme Court. So we filed that amicus brief today in the 11th Circuit. It makes those three arguments that we made in our Michigan case, which is enumerated powers, lack of enumerated powers in the government's part, Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment, because of the vagueness of the law that was passed. So a pretty big step here today. To be clear, we're not plaintiffs in that case, so we're not parties to the case, but we're interested and lending our support and additional weight and credibility to important constitutional questions that hopefully will be eventually considered by the Supreme Court of the United States.
All right, well, thanks for that update. I want to move on to an article. Well, the topic of today's conversation originated in this article that Dave Ager wrote for Crane's Detroit Business, and it outlines 8 differences the governor and the legislators will need to iron out before the state budget can be resolved. And these are all issues that business organizations care about. So let's go through them one by one, and let's start with housing. The Democratic legislators want to spend more on housing than Governor Whitmer proposes. And this is amid an affordability crisis. So give us a little bit background here and what our stance is.
Yeah, Michigan has a shortage in housing, and our housing stock, that which we do have on average, is over 50 years old. So we have an older housing stock on top of the shortage. And so really a critical situation. The lot of love for housing in this budget. So the governor proposed the Senate and the House up the ante by about $150 million. Different approaches in the House and the Senate. So the House would go to the Michigan State Housing Authority. It would be to build new single or multifamily units, to renovate existing units, and then also energy efficiency projects. And then the Senate plan would have MISTA divvy up resources for more specific purposes. And it would go through community partners, foundations, faith-based organizations, and other governments, and then prioritize veterans, seniors, and low-income residents. So different approaches on the details, and we actually have a lot of confidence in MISTA and the MISTA director, um, and a lot of great innovation that's happening, and an approach that really does seem to address like just the realistic nature of the need, and how to really inspire developers to do more in this area. So more for housing generally seems like a good thing, and probably a few less strings attached. So MISTA could develop specialized programs or very specific things to deal with some of the deficiencies out there would probably make sense. So definitely an issue that we're supportive of, but maybe a few less of the kind of specific or predetermined um, rules would be a little better than the highly prescriptive approach, which is on the table today.
All right, let's move on to startups. The governor wants to direct 60 million into the Venture Michigan Fund, and create new investments in early stage startup companies. The Senate embraces the shift, but the House does not account for it as part of the budget. Fill us in here.
Yeah, so this is one where there's just a difference in approach and priority, something that the governor has proposed and the Senate went along with. And so there's a big if on this one, which is how will the government decide what to invest in terms of startups? As our audience would know very well, every business at some point started up highly. Um, uh, there's a lot of risk in starting up a business for the individual, but also how does the government pick which ones that it would invest in and which ones that it wouldn't? And so I think that's really the unanswered question that needs to be addressed for this to really kind of get um, more steam as it goes through the process to resolve these differences. So um, the venture capital community is absolutely behind this proposal, and is insisting that it is necessary for there to be some sort of public investment, but still does kind of um, uh, does deserve some further exploration in terms of how would the government determine which of all the different startups. In fact, we were just looking at our scorecard report, which will come out pretty soon. A lot of startup activity that's been happening in Michigan. Which ones deserve public investment, which ones don't, is I think a really important question that they need to answer for this.
Yes, nice plug. The 2024 scorecard will be out Wednesday afternoon, so we'll be sharing that on social media then. All right, let's talk about pension payments. Democrats are on board with the proposal by Whitmer to stop making payments toward other post-employment benefit liabilities in the Michigan Public School Employees Retirement System, because now they're over 100% funded. But they're kind of not sure what to do with the 669 million that would be freed up by this maneuver.
Yeah, so this is there's been a lot of ups and downs in this debate. The governor had originally, think of it like the second mortgage. So it's like you have two big public pension debts for schools. And during the Snyder administration, a payment plan to pay those off was established. And one of those, the other post-employment benefits, so it'd be like retiree health care, That one now shows as kind of paid off. But keep in mind, this is just based on projections on what the actuarial studies estimate the future cost to be, and there's enough money now saved up for that. There's another very large liability remaining for the regular pension system. And so you've got on one side Republicans saying, no, yeah, you paid off the second mortgage. That's great. Now put all that money toward paying off the first mortgage and think how great it would be if all the debt was gone. And then the governor saying, look, we could stop making that second payment and then put into other programs, things like universal preschool or community college for all, and like this idea that there would be um, programs so the state would keep that money and use it for new programs. And what schools are saying, and what the legislature seems to be leaning more toward, is saying, local school districts have to contribute to pension funds too. Why don't you reduce the amount that they have to pay to the pensions into the pension system, both employees and the schools? And then the schools will just have extra money in the local school system to do with whatever they want to use it for. I think at the end of the day, you're probably going to see the Democrats in the legislature win over this. Clearly, the school community is on their side when it comes to the approach. So in other words, to reduce the amount that the locals have to pay into the pension fund and keep the state's payments level. So as opposed to the state reducing theirs to start new programs. So that's where I think it'll probably end up, which would be a pretty substantial between $600 and $700 million boost to local budgets, in addition to whatever the state's going to end up doing with their per pupil allotment. So the per pupil allotment, that's something you hear that, the state pays to local schools a certain amount per child. So they'll get that, but then also one of their local bills may be reduced. So if I had to guess it right now, I'd say that probably the legislative Democrats are going to come out on top of that because they have really strong school administrator and teacher support.
All right, let's talk about Pure Michigan. Obviously, a very well-known and famous campaign that has been running here for quite some time, but Whitmer and legislators are at odds over what to do with spending here moving forward.
Yeah, so this is one where we definitely have a clear favorite. So we like Pure Michigan at SBAM. Our tourism industry really does well with it, but also which is dominated by small businesses, but also it's just a good and positive message out in the world about Michigan in general, the type of place it is to visit, the type of place it is to live, type of place it is to work, and so the governor's proposal is much more modest. In recent years, it had for some reason kind of fallen out of favor, and the amount allotted had gone down quite a bit. To $15 million. And then there's some additional that comes with matched hours for local spend. The House and the House and the Senate are proposing the House $50 million for Pure Michigan, and then the Senate 25 million. So both above the governor's 15 million request. We consider as we kind of evaluate this, we consider kind of like full funding for Pure Michigan to be $25 million. So that's what we look at as a minimum amount that they ought to be putting into it. And of course, the House coming in at 50 really does make up for the cutback that we've seen in recent years as the state's investment in what is by far the most successful state-based tourism campaign and branding campaign in the country.
Okay, moving on to build ready sites. Whitmer wants 25 million to identify and prepare sites for future business development or redevelopment, but neither the House nor the Senate are on board with this.
Yeah, so this is I would consider this to be kind of an extension of the Strategic Outreach and Reserve Fund, the SOAR fund that you've heard. It's these big incentive projects came out of this particular fund. And one of the things that fund can do is pay for site readiness projects. So try to get a big factory in, buy up some land, get the infrastructure in, the freeway on-ramps and off-ramps and traffic lights or whatever else that you need in order to accommodate a project like that. The idea is to get more of those sites ready. A few years ago, this probably would have been a popular proposal, but the House and the Senate seem to be um, cool on the idea. Neither the House nor the Senate put this in their versions of the budget that passed. And it has to do with a few things. First, there's fatigue. So just billions of dollars gone into these projects, some fatigue on allocating resources, especially as the dollars are more flat this year as compared to previous years when you saw big growth with the pandemic spending in federal dollars. The so in this case where the House and the Senate are leaning away from it, there's another kind of undercurrent on this issue, which is that many are asking this question: why greenfields? Why out in the country? Why not? You got all these cities that had a big industrial base. In some cases, there's some legacy issues with things that need to be cleaned up. Why not put resources into those kinds of sites? And I think that if there was something more explicit toward redevelopment of old industrial sites in cities, then there probably would be more interest among the legislature as opposed to what has lately been happening, which is the more the greenfield type of an approach.
Okay, the next one will be familiar to people who watch the briefing. That's Going Pro. Going Pro awards grants to employers to assist in training and developing and retaining currently and newly hired employees. Whitmer wants to boost the program's funding by 20 million.
Yeah, so Whitmer is the most aggressive on this one. So this is a highly popular and highly successful employee training program. It's a partnership between businesses and could be trade schools or community colleges and then the state in order to for businesses that want to upskill their workers, so investing in their workforce. There's more demand than there are dollars allocated for this program every year. And they've done a lot of work. Actually, SBAM was very involved with trying to change the program to make it more accessible or easier for small businesses to take advantage of it too, so that further increase the demand. So the governor is proposing increasing it by 20 million. Right now, it's at just under $55 million. So the governor proposing to put about $75 million into it. The House is proposing a pretty healthy increase to 15 million, so just a little bit less than the governor. Well, it's 5 million less. In the state budget, that's a little. I'm from this little town called Portland. 5 million still seems like a lot of money to me. The Senate, though, basically holding it even. So an increase of $250,000 would just put it, pretty much the same. So I think there's a really, of course, great chance that Going Pro, at least at the current levels, will continue on into the future. The question is, do they go higher or not? And in this case, the governor has, I think it's a smart investment. This is one where you've got ready-made demand already. It's an investment in the existing workforce. And we know that it works. There's a lot of programs out there that it's hard to test whether or not it works. In this case, the education is going and the employee development is going to employees that are already employed in the place where those skills are going to be utilized, which gives a very high degree of success.
All right, let's talk about education, but on the front end, and that's preschool. We've talked a lot about preschool and the governor's proposals, but there are some differing approaches to expanding free preschool for the 4-year-olds. What's on the
Yeah.
table?
In this case, I think there's going to be an expansion of preschool availability through this budget, regardless of which direction they want to go. So the governor really does want to eliminate income eligibility. So it would just essentially make it universal. And so but there's already in previous years increases in the income eligibility. So there, in some cases, you got more slots than people that want to use them. So there's extra capacity in some communities. So pushback in the House that would uh, that would keep some income eligibility requirements and but then to provide additional supports and services for those who are in preschool. So in other words, keep the income eligibility increasing, but keep them generally in place, and then use the extra dollars. So still spend the dollars on preschool, but use it to provide wraparound services for lower income people in preschool. The place that has gotten the most controversy, though, in this area is that there right now there's an earmark, if you will, in the budget that says that at least 30% of the slots have to go to private daycare providers. So, in other words, it can't just be for public schools that offer preschool, but also private providers that offer preschool. Same teacher certification, same curriculum required in the Great Start Readiness Program, but 30% to private providers. And the House proposed to eliminate that, which is pretty controversial. And I expect that that will be put back in. And here's why. If you were to take all of this new capacity and just give it to public schools, then it would move some kids from the private daycare system over to the public school system and undermine the viability of daycare operations. And you're still going to need those daycare operations. You're still going to need that part of the system for for when kids aren't in school. So it's 4-year-olds in daycare. If you remove them, pretty much all of them from private daycare, then the entire daycare system will be undermined. And I think that that message is actually getting through, and just the need to have more providers, not less, is something that I think at the end of the day that probably that 30% requirement will be restored.
All right, and finally, the next topic is scholarships. Governor Whitmer has proposed amending the Michigan Achievement Scholarship and to gradually phase out the Michigan Tuition Grant. So what are these and what is her proposal overall?
Yeah, so this is one, it's been proposed back and forth on this where whether this scholarship should be offered to kids so that they go to private universities. And we're talking about a smaller overall a smaller tuition grant. And it's the House does not favor ending the tuition grant um, or the kind of overarching community college guarantee. Rather, what they're saying is that they would rather have an achievement scholarship and to provide last dollar support. So like the idea is that people would apply for and receive all the kind of supports that they could, and then the state's kind of the last one in to make up the gap. It's actually a pretty efficient way of looking at it, as opposed to a flat community college guarantee where people wouldn't necessarily have the incentive to go through the process of what's my Pell Grant or what, just the different things that you can do. Um, the last hour approach, especially for community college, makes it much more affordable to the state and therefore the taxpayer. The Senate proposed to increase the maximum $4,000 achievement scholarship up to $5,500, and then and to make it for all 4-year public universities and private colleges. And it would be kind of a front end program. So really different approaches. The Senate is one that probably the 4-year not probably, the 4-year university is definitely gonna like that one better. So different approaches, but here's a nice thing about all of these things that we've gone over is that they are speaking to priorities within the system where we have housing shortages, we have childcare issues, we have a need for upskilling, whether it's trades and things like going pro or more people going to college. All of these things are kind of components. So while there are lots of details to work out and whether it's going to be at this level or that level, the overall things that are being debated, like the playing field is the right playing field. And I think that bodes generally pretty well for the idea that we'll get a pretty decent budget out of this year.
All right, well, great insight. And I did share the link to Dave's article in the chat and on Facebook as well. And this is a really good time to remind those tuning in that if you are considering joining or upgrading, our VIP and elite members do receive a free subscription to Crane's Detroit Business. So a really excellent perk of those membership types. And let us know if we can help you with that. All right, Brian, we have a quick Data Monday report next.
All right, so let's take a look at what is happening. Of course, the biggest item is the inflation numbers that came out last week. You saw the stock market, good times are here again, and it's because there are no surprises. It wasn't that inflation numbers came in better than expected; they came in as expected, and because that had not been the case here for a little while. Seemed like there were lots of surprises or things being a little worse than what people are expecting. Um, this one came in right on point, which seemed to give investors some confidence. If you're to take a look at the month over month, so this right here, what you're looking at is a line graph going all the way back to 1990, looking at core inflation and top line inflation. The overall CPI came in at 3.4%. This is year over year, and this is month over month. And you see both the top line inflation and also core coming in at 0.3% month over month. And if you're to look at the top line inflation, you see it jumps around all over the place, up, down, then kind of was gradually climbing up and then stayed the same and a little bit down here at the very end. And with the core inflation, really kind of you could talk yourself into an upward trend here for the last say 9 or 10 months. But if you look at just the last 4 months, looks like maybe finally starting to turn around a little bit. So if you look at the different categories, this first set of categories are year over year changes. Look at motor vehicle insurance. Remember, this is nationally. This is not just Michigan. I know that people have been talking a lot about auto insurance in Michigan lately, but nationally, this is one of the areas where there has been a lot of inflation. If you think about it, the things that go into fixing vehicles have all been up. So this kind of makes sense. You see hospital costs way up. You see motor vehicle maintenance and repair, of course, that going into those insurance costs as well. So if you look at some areas where there's been deflation, so used car and trucks, that's been the case now for a while. And then a few and some of the commodities that have been coming down as well. Now this one is looking at month over month changes. So you see, gasoline is one of those things that is really pushed up. There's 2.8%, and that's not an annual number. That's a monthly number. So that's a pretty big impact on the overall numbers here. You see natural gas and used car and trucks being on the negative end as well. And then looking at this is what you call the super core. So this would be take out the you take out the food and fuel. That's the core. Super core is you take out housing too. So basically, this would be like you take out those kind of main necessities, and all the other stuff that you buy. What's happening with those prices? And well, it looks about the same as it's up a little higher. So this is 0.242%. If you look at those, the core, the regular core inflation and the regular CPI 0.3. So this just says that the necessities are increasing a little bit less than everything else. And then looking at this is not inflation here. This is actually just looking at retail and food services or sales. And you see, just look at the way this month over month, these changes, the way it just jumps up and down. And it was zero. So it's flat with the previous month. And that was not particularly surprising compared just with the type of anecdotal things that we're seeing on the ground. I thought this was a really, really interesting survey from the Conference Board. And there was a time, if we were to look at this a few years ago, you saw much higher job satisfaction among those who changed jobs. And but that has switched around now. So what you'll see here, so job satisfaction in 2022. So look at this, you had 65% for those who changed jobs. And then that satisfaction dropped all the way back to 59% for those who changed jobs this year. And but if you're to look at those who stayed put, their satisfaction went from 62% up to about 65%. And so in this case, you see those who kept their jobs now are reporting higher job satisfaction. They're just very different from the last 2 or 3 years, and pretty good to see. And then my final slide here is just talking about a component of the annual Gallup survey, which really speaks to what's on people's minds. And so, what's the most important financial problem facing U.S. families? And so, asking people, but then according to their income, you see a lot of very similar responses across all of these thresholds, regardless of whether somebody is lower income, less than 40,000, in the between 40 and 100,000, or then over 100,000. Very similar answers. What stuck out to me though is you look at this inflation number. So see how the concern among inflation, that's the biggest issue, is inflation. It's a lot higher than these other two categories. That one stuck out at me. But where do those respondents that otherwise would have answered inflation? Well, they're right here. Not enough money to pay debts. And so it's interesting as you think of something like, my concern is inflation, but for lower income people, inflation means not enough money to pay debts. And it's one of the reasons why I think that that's still going to be a very potent issue for anybody who's running for office, to talk about what your response is, what your plans are, why it could be or should be different in the future. So pretty interesting and full week of data that came out last week, and but no huge surprises.
All right, well, thanks as always for the report out and the insight. That's it for today. We will be back here Thursday at 3 p.m. Have a great week.
See you next week, everybody, or Thursday.